The stars over Coober's Rest had never lied before. Dusty Doyle had lived under the sky his whole life. 41 years of watching it turn from bruised orange to full black, counting the same constellations his father taught it before the drought took the western paddock. He knew what a shooting star looked like. He knew what a satellite looked like, crawling low and slow across the dark. He did not know what the thing coming down over Bald Ridge looked like, and that was a problem. It didn't fall like a meteor. It descended, deliberate, almost polite, trailing a thin green afterglow that hissed against the cold night air. Dusty stood on the veranda with a mug of tea, going cold in his hand, and watched it drop behind the ridge like something lowering itself into a bath. Inside, his niece Mia, 17, sharp as a fence wire, home for summer, was already pulling on her boots. "Uncle Dusty, tell me you saw that." "Saw it. Tell me we're driving out there." He didn't answer. He just grabbed the torch off the hook by the door, which in Dusty's world was the same as saying yes. The Uda rattled over corrugated dirt for 20 minutes before the smell hit them. Hot metal and something like burnt rubber, except wrong, sweeter chemical. They crested the last rise and the headlights caught it. A shape half buried in red dust, smooth and dark, steaming faintly, no bigger than a horse float. A seam along its side glowed a dim blue, pulsing like it was breathing. "That," Mia said quietly, "is not ours." It wasn't. A section of the hull folded open with a sound like a hell breath being released, and something small and spider-legged unfolded itself, hovering a meter off the ground on a soft hum of light. A lens rotated toward them. Then a voice, flat and translated with an accent that belonged to no country on Earth, crackled out of it. "Scanning. Biosphere designation. Low threat. Dominant species. Bipedal unremarkable. Secondary fauna." The drone paused, cycling through data. Marsupial. Slow. Passive. Prey tier. Recommend proceed with resource extraction without defensive countermeasures. Dusty felt something move behind him before he heard it. A low, huffing breath. A weight settling into the dirt. Rex had wandered up out of the dark the way he always did, like he'd been standing there the whole time and the world had simply failed to notice. 7 feet of scarred red fur. When he stood up straight, one ear notched from a dingo fight nobody but him remembered, older than half the fences on the property. The town called him a local legend. Dusty just called him a pain in the backside who'd eaten every rose bush his late wife had ever planted. The drone's lens swiveled toward the sound. It didn't even finish its sentence. Prey tier, negligible THR. Rex hit it like a freight train wearing boxing gloves. The drone cartwheeled through the air, struck the fence post with a crack that echoed off the ridge, and dropped into the dirt in a shower of sparks, one leg twitching uselessly. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Mia started laughing so hard she had to sit down on the bonnet of the Uda. "Prey tier," she wheezed. "Oh, they have no idea." Dusty crouched by the smoking drone, torchlight catching the dented casing. Whatever was in that hole behind the ridge, it had come a very long way to learn something Coober's Rest could have told it for free. You do not call a red kangaroo prey tier. Not in this paddock. He looked back at the pod, still humming, still glowing faint blue in the dark. Whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be quiet. "Get in the truck," he said. "We need to wake the town up." By sunrise, half of Coober's Rest had seen the lights, and the other half didn't believe the first half, until the second pod came down over the old Opal Claims at 7 a.m., in broad daylight, in front of 40 witnesses, and Nell Kirby's entire breakfast shift at the roadhouse. After that, nobody was arguing. The town hall hadn't been full like this since the '04 flood. 214 people, give or take, packed into a building meant for maybe 80. All tried to talk at once until Sheriff Nell put 2 fingers in her mouth and whistled loud enough to rattle the windows. "Right," she said, into the sudden silence. "Dusty, talk." He told them everything. The pod, the drone, the word prey tier, the way Rex had ended that particular conversation. A few people laughed. Most didn't. Nobody in that room needed convincing that something dangerous had landed nearby. The second pod had made that plain enough. What they needed to know was what it wanted. That answer came from an unlikely source. Warwick, who ran the general store and, more usefully, had spent 30 years as a mining geologist before he got sick of city life. He'd gone out at dawn with a borrowed rock hammer and more nerve than sense, and come back with a sample and a theory. There's a mineral seam under this whole basin, he said, spreading a hand-drawn map across the counter. Runs from the ridge clean through to the old opal claims. Rare stuff. Resonant. Conducts energy in ways that shouldn't be possible outside a lab. I always figured it was worthless. Turns out it might be the reason we've got visitors. Static crackle from the roadhouse radio, which had, for reasons nobody could explain, started picking up alien transmissions an hour earlier. A voice came through, translated in that same flat, alien-accented tone, clearly not intended for human ears, but broadcasting anyway, like whoever was sending had an account for the very old, very leaky equipment scattered across the district. Extraction timeline unaffected. Local fauna reclassified from negligible to irritant. Deploy clearance units. Avoid further contact with the quadruped. The room went dead silent and then erupted into the loudest laugh Coober's rest had produced in a decade. Irritant, Nell repeated, grinning. They downgraded us to irritant. But Dusty wasn't laughing, not really. Underneath the joke was something colder. These things weren't here to talk or trade or even conquer in any way that made sense to a human. They wanted what was underground, and they decided the fastest way to get it was to clear away anything living on top of it. A farm, a town, 214 people, one very stubborn kangaroo. The way you clear brush before laying a road. They're not invading Earth, he said slowly. They're strip mining it. We're just in the way. Warwick folded his map back up, jaw tight. Then we'd better make being in the way as expensive as possible. Outside, the sky over Bald Ridge had gone a faint, sickly green and stayed that way. Nobody in that hall knew yet how right Dusty was about to be, or how much of what came next would come down to 800 pounds of muscle, fur, and spite standing between an alien mining operation and everything Coober's Rest had ever built. But Rex knew his paddock, and Rex did not share. Rex hadn't always been a legend. He'd started out, as far as anyone could tell, as an ordinary Joey born somewhere out past the ridge in a drought year, so bad half the district's stock didn't make it through. Nobody knew why he'd lived when so much else hadn't. He just had. Through that drought and the flood 11 years later that drowned half the low paddocks, and a fire that came within a mile of the homestead and somehow swung wide at the last minute, like it thought better of it. Old Ted Doyle, Dusty's father, used to say Rex had made some kind of deal with the country itself. Dusty never quite believed that, but he'd also never had a good explanation for how one kangaroo could survive that much bad luck and come out the other side bigger, meaner, and utterly unbothered by anything short of full-grown bull. And even had only gone one round before the bull reconsidered its life choices. So when Ward came pounding on Homestead door 2 days later, wild-eyed, saying the aliens had sent a scanner drone out toward the eastern paddock and had gone quiet mid-transmission, Dusty already had a guess about why. They found the drone in 3 separate pieces, scattered across 40 feet of red dirt, and Rex sitting nearby in the shade of a mulga tree looking, if a kangaroo could look anything, thoroughly unimpressed. Warwick crouched by the wreckage and went very still. Dusty, look at the casing. The drone's outer shell, some kind of layered alloy plate, clearly built to shrug off small arms fire, had buckled inward in a perfect kangaroo boot-shaped dent and cracked clean through along the seam. Their shielding's not built for impact, Warwick said slowly, turning the pieces over in his hands. It's tuned for energy weapons, heat, that kind of thing, but a solid, concentrated hit, especially at the frequency a kick like that generates. It doesn't know how to distribute the force. It just breaks. Dusty looked over at Rex, who had, with total indifference, gone back to chewing on a tuft of dry grass like he hadn't just proven himself the most effective anti-alien weapon in the district. You're telling me, Dusty said, that the thing keeping these bastards safe from bullets and heat rays can't handle a kick from an angry marsupial. I'm telling you, their engineers never met an Australian animal. Warwick almost smiled, because if they had, none of this would have made it past the planning stage. That evening, word spread through Coober's Rest away word always did, fast and slightly exaggerated by the third telling. By nightfall, half the town swore Rex had taken down the drone midair. The other half swore he'd done it without breaking stride. Nobody corrected them. because for the first time since the ships came down, the fear in the town had a crack of something else running through it. Hope. And underneath the hope, a plan started to take shape. Because if one old kangaroo could put a scanner drone in 3 pieces by accident, then a coordinated effort, using every stubborn animal and every stubborn person this town had, might do a great deal more than that on purpose. Dusty scratched Rex behind a notched ear, which Rex tolerated for exactly 2 seconds before shrugging him off. Reckon you and me have got some work to do, old man. Rex huffed, unimpressed, and went back to grass. Somewhere out past a ridge, the green light over the alien camp flared brighter, and the drilling began. The drilling rig went up over the old opal claims on the 4th day, a spindly black tower that hummed loud enough to rattle the windows in the roadhouse 3 miles off. And by that afternoon the bore, that fed half the town's water, had gone from clear to the color of weak tea. That was the moment Coober's Rest stopped being afraid and started being angry. "They're not just mining," Nell said, staring at the brown water sputtering from the tap behind the bar. "They're mining through our aquifer." The town meeting that followed lasted 11 minutes and ended with more decisions than the first one had managed in 2 hours. Warwick would rig every Uda and tractor with whatever noise and light they could scavenge. The alien sensors, it turned out, hated interference almost as much as they hated impact. Nell would coordinate 3 teams to draw the clearance drones away from a rig. And Dusty, along with anyone willing to walk out into open ground with nothing but nerve and a length of steel pipe, would go straight at the drilling operation itself. Rex came without being asked. He always did. They hit the rig site just after dusk, headlights blazing, horns blaring an ungodly racket that sent the alien sensor drone spinning in confused circles, unable to lock onto anything through the noise. 2 clearance units, squat, 4-legged things bristling with stub-nosed weapon mounts, turned intercept, and for a moment Dusty's stomach dropped, because these weren't scanner drones built to catalog wildlife. These were built to fight. The first shot crack passed close enough that Dusty felt the heat of it against his cheek, and the pipe fence beside him sagged and smoked where it hit. That was when the mob arrived. Nobody had planned it. Not really. Rex had simply vanished into the scrub an hour earlier and come back, leading nearly 30 kangaroos out of the eastern paddocks, drawn by nothing anyone could explain except, maybe, the same stubbornness that had kept their leader alive through 2 droughts and a flood. They came in fast and low across the open ground, and the clearance units, built to model an unremarkable, prey-tier species standing still and running away, had no idea what to do with 30 animals running at them at full speed. The fight that followed wasn't clean. 1 clearance unit went down under a hail of kicks before it managed a single shot. The other clipped the young kangaroo's shoulder before Rex hit it broadside hard enough to fold its front leg backward, and it collapsed hissing sparks into the red dirt. The drilling rig groaned, sensors overwhelmed by noise and impact alike, and shut itself down mid-bore with a shriek of protesting metal. For a moment, silence. Then, from the alien camp radio, a voice, no longer flat, no longer calm, edged with something that in any species would have been called panic. Unacceptable losses. Fauna reclassification required. Reclassify. Hostile. Repeat. Hostile. Dusty, breathing hard, pipe still in hand, allowed himself something close to a laugh. Little late for that. But as the town gathered its wounded, 1 broken arm, several burns, 1 kangaroo limping badly but alive, the laugh didn't last. This had worked because the aliens hadn't expected it. Next time they would... Warwick found him afterward, staring at the dead clearance unit, jaw tight. "They're calling this in," he said quietly. "Whatever's coming next, it's not 2 pods anymore." Above them, far out past the ridge where the sky had gone that sickly green, something new began to glow, bigger, brighter, and unmistakably closer than before. The mothership announced itself the way distant thunder does, as a feeling before it was a sound, a low pressure behind the eyes that every person in Coober's Rest felt at roughly the same moment, 2 days after the fight at the drilling rig. When they finally saw it that evening, hanging low and vast over the horizon like a second, wrong-colored moon, nobody needed Warwick's geology or the radio chatter to understand what it meant. Reinforcements. And not the kind 214 people and 30 kangaroos could out-noise this time. "They're bringing everything," Nell said, watching it through a pair of borrowed binoculars from the roof of the roadhouse. Estimated arrival, Dawn, near enough. Somewhere in the wreckage of the second down clearance unit, Warwick had found something worth more than scrap. A data core, half-fried but readable, that gave them their first real look at the enemy's own assessment of the fight. It wasn't flattering to the aliens. Their commander, a mid-ranked officer named, as close as the translation software could manage, Vexalan, had reported the operation under control right up until the moment the drilling rig went dark, and spent the 2 days in sending increasingly desperate requests up the chain for support, framing an embarrassing tactical defeat by rural wildlife as an unprecedented and highly dangerous new threat classification. He's terrified of losing his career over a mob of kangaroos, Warwick said, half laughing, half appalled. That's actually going to be useful. Scared commanders make mistakes. Useful or not, dawn was still coming, and Coober's Rest was still one town. So Dusty did the only thing that made sense. He got on the radio, the old CB network that connected every station for 200 kilometers, the one built for droughts and floods and fires, never once for this. And he told the truth plainly, the way his father had taught him to deliver bad news. This is Dusty Doyle out of Coober's Rest. We've got a situation, and it's not one any of you are going to believe until you see it. I need every hand, every OODA, every bit of steel pipe and scrap metal you can spare, out here by first light. I won't lie to you. It's dangerous. But I don't reckon there's a soul on this network who wants aliens digging under their own water table necks. The response came back station by station, gruff and unhesitating, the same way this whole district had always answered call for help, fire, flood, or otherwise. 60 kilometers out, a road train loaded with scrap steel and diesel began rolling toward Coober's Rest. Further south, 3 stations pooled every spare vehicle they owned. And from the scrub beyond the homestead, as if he understood exactly what was coming, Rex gathered his mob at the fence line and simply waited, ears up, facing the ridge. Mia found Dusty on a veranda well past midnight, unable to sleep any more than he could. "You scared?" she asked. He thought about lying, decided against it. "Yeah." "Good," she said. "Means you're paying attention." Out past Bald Ridge, the green glow of the mothership pulsed steadily brighter, closer, patient. The way something moves when believes absolutely that it has already won. Coober's Rest intended to make sure it was wrong. Dawn broke over Bald Ridge in 2 colors, the honest golden Outback sunrise, and beneath it, spreading, the sick green light of an alien fleet beginning its descent. Coober's Rest met it in the open ground below the drilling site, every OODA and road train and borrowed tractor arranged in a rough line across the flat, headlights and horns, and every scrap of improvised noise-making equipment Warwick could rig, standing ready. Behind them, drawn from every station within 200 kilometers, close to 400 people stood, with whatever they brought, pipes, tools, a handful of legally owned rifles, and no small amount of raw nerve. And at the center of it all, Rex stood at the head of his mob, 60 kangaroos strong now, drawn from every paddock in the district, facing the ridge like they'd been waiting their whole lives for exactly this. The alien landing craft came down in a wide arc, a dozen clearance units disgorging onto flat in tight formation, and for one terrible moment, it looked like Coober's Rest had badly misjudged the size of the fight it had picked. Then the noise hit. 40 horns, 60 engines, every borrowed generator and speaker Warwick had wired together all at once, and the clearance units, sensors built for a threat model quiet, unremarkable prey animals, staggered under an assault they had no framework for. Shots went wide. Formations broke. In the chaos, the town's ragged lines surged forward, and the fight they'd been building for 6 days finally arrived in full. It was not clean. It was not easy. A tractor took a direct hit and folded sideways, its driver thrown clear, dragged to safety by 2 men from the southern stations. A young kangaroo went down and didn't get back up, and for a moment Dusty felt something in his chest crack that had nothing to do with fear. But the line held, and at the heart of it, Rex fought like the country itself had a grudge to settle. He tore through the clearance units 2 and 3 at a time, taking hits that would have dropped a lesser animal and shrugging them off with nothing but a furious grunt, until only one target remained standing at the center of the field, a squat, heavily shielded generator unit, humming with the same pale energy that powered every alien shield on the battlefield, the one piece of equipment Vexalan's forces had built strong enough, they believed, to withstand anything Earth could throw at it. They had not accounted for Rex. He came at it from a dead run, ears back, 7 feet of scarred red fury, closing the last 20 meters in a blur, and hit the generator's housing with every ounce of momentum a lifetime of surviving droughts, floods, and one very embarrassed bull had built into him. The impact didn't just dent the casing. It cracked the containment field wide open, and the shockwave that followed rolled outward across the battlefield in a wave of failing energy, every alien shield on the flat flickering and dying at once. For the first time since the ships came down, the invaders were just as exposed as everyone else. The fight that followed lasted less than 10 minutes. Without their shielding, the clearance units fell fast, and somewhere above the ridge, a very frightened, very career-conscious Vexalan gave the only order that made sense to a commander who had just watched his entire tactical advantage collapse under the weight of one furious Kangaroo. Retreat. The landing craft peeled away in ragged formation, the mothership's green glow already dimming as it pulled back toward orbit, and Coober's rest stood in the settling dust of the battlefield, bruised, exhausted, and, for the first time in 6 days, entirely, gloriously alone under an honest gold sky. Rex stood at the center of it all, breathing hard, one ear more notched than before, utterly unbothered. Chewing on a tuft of grass, he apparently found time to grab mid-battle. Somebody started clapping. Then everybody did. They rebuilt the drilling site's fence within a week, and the bore ran clear again within 2. And by the time the first proper rain came, early, generous, the kind of rain the district hadn't seen in years, Coober's Rest had mostly gone back to being what it had always been, a small, stubborn town that nobody outside a 200-kilometer radius had ever heard of. Except now it had a story. Mia told it first at the roadhouse, to a table of station hands who'd driven 3 hours just to hear it firsthand. And she told it well, better than Dusty ever could, with all the right pauses, all the right details, the drone's exact words, the sound Rex's kick made against alloy plating, the look on everyone's face when the shields went down all at once across the whole battlefield. By the third telling, people who'd been there swore she'd gotten it exactly right, which was, Dusty figured, the highest compliment a story could earn. Vexalan, for his part, was never heard from again, not by Coober's Rest, and, as far as anyone could later determine from the wreckage his forces left behind, not by whoever he'd answered to either. Warwick liked to joke that somewhere out among the stars, there was now an official report explaining, in careful bureaucratic language, how an interstellar mining operation had been defeated by a rural Australian town and one geriatric marsupial, and that whoever had to write that report had probably not enjoyed it. Rex went back to eating rose bushes. He never got any less ordinary about it. Either no parade, no ceremony would have suited him, and everyone in town understood that instinctively. Instead, Dusty started leaving an extra bucket of feed out by the mulga tree each evening, and Rex kept showing up for it the way he always had, utterly unbothered, as if defending an entire town from an alien invasion had been a mildly interesting Tuesday and nothing more. But the town remembered. On quiet evenings, when new visitors passed through, and there were more of those now, drawn by a story that had somehow made its way well beyond the district, someone would always end up pointing out toward the paddocks and telling them to look for the big red roo with the notched ear, and to mind their manners around him, because that one had personally sent an alien invasion packing, and he did not, under any circumstances, appreciate being called praetor. Dusty stood on the veranda most evenings now, the way he always had, watching the sky turn from bruised orange to full black, counting the same constellations his father had taught him. The stars had lied to him once. 6 days that felt like a different lifetime. But they'd told the truth every night since, and he found he didn't mind the occasional exception. Not anymore. Not when it had ended the way this one had. Somewhere out past the fence in the dark, he heard the low huff of a very large kangaroo settling down for the night, 30 feet away, exactly where he'd always been. Dusty raised his mug in that direction, tea long gone cold. Night, old man. The huff that answered might have meant anything. Dusty chose to believe it meant good night back. And out under that honest, ordinary sky, Coober's Rest slept easy, because whatever else came looking for trouble in this stretch of the Outback, it would have to get past the red kangaroo first.